And welcome to the Draft Indy podcast. I'm Grant Sinning, and I'm joined today by Brian and Garrett, along with special guest Jake Arthur from ProFootballSpot. How you guys doing tonight?
Awesome.
Good.
Great. So tonight we're dedicating a little bit of the episode talking to Jake, and then we're going to talk about the Combine, considering the Combine starts here tomorrow, right? Interviews and stuff like that starting tomorrow.
Tomorrow we're getting a look at D-line, right? Isn't that the first group? Or
Well, I don't think they start workouts until...
I know, but they get measured, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, they're coming in and they're going to do their medical stuff, and it's a process, man. Like these dudes this week are going to not have a lot of sleep. They're paraded around like group to group to group, like go do your medicals. If you can't do the medical, then you got to wait in line for, an MRI, and then you got to move on and do interviews for...
It's like the NFL DMV or something. It's really weird.
Yeah, it is weird, but the cool thing is like, I don't know if you guys read the story I'd say about a month ago when they're talking about how Indy might lose the Combine, and there's so much stuff that goes on that we don't even really know about. Like they're talking about how underneath Lucas Oil Stadium they've got room for 5 MRI buses and all that kind of stuff where they can just wheel them in, and then there's a direct path to IU Methodist and all that kind of stuff. Like no other facility in the...
We have an escape tunnel?
Yeah.
I can imagine the event staff for that.
Yeah. Yeah, this is such a huge event, and it's cool that it's in Indianapolis, and even though I know all of us at Draft Indy don't live in Indianapolis, it's still a cool event because, Indianapolis, I lived in Indiana for a while, so other than these guys, I know I can say Indianapolis is such a great town, and I know that this event, was really big for Indianapolis, and they at least get it till 2020. So it's a cool event, and we'll get to that a little later on. But first, we kind of wanted to talk to Jake and see how things are going at ProFootballSpot. So Jake, so what's been going on with you guys? What are you guys doing? Any cool articles we should check out, or series, or what's just kind of on the docket for you guys?
Well, right now, of course, it's kind of the slow portion of the off season as far as actual football-wise goes. So, got a pretty big focus on the draft. We've got 32 individual team sites, and pretty much the main focus right now is really getting into draft coverage. We've got a really good draft website that's going right now. They're trying to crank out scouting reports and things like that. As far as what we've been doing at the Colts site, we've been kind of reviewing the 2015 rookies. They've got a year under their belt, so kind of see how they did their rookie year, focusing on some of the guys who would be good fits with the Colts coming up here in the draft, just things like that.
Okay, so out of the rookies last year, who was your favorite? It's probably everyone's favorite, but I'll ask you just to see.
Well, Henry Anderson, if he would have had the full year, I think that would have been incredible. In my opinion, he was one of the best 3-4 defensive ends tackles that I watched all year. I thought David Perry quietly had a pretty good year. I think as far as what the team expected of him, I thought Dorsett actually met what the team's expectations probably were. Gathers, I thought altogether they had a pretty good draft up until, the sixth round wasn't very productive, but of course you would have liked to get more out of DeJon Smith, but it is what it is. Injuries happen. Hopefully those guys come back healthy next year.
Yeah, he was pretty much injured the whole year. I think it's kind of not really fair to try, and I guess you can evaluate him, but it's hard to evaluate someone on limited snaps. And kind of going back to your Dorsett comment, and I think you're right. There was that game, I can't remember which team it was, but it was basically give the ball to Dorsett. That was the
Tennessee. Wasn't the Tennessee game where Hasselbeck was throwing it up to him and he jumped over 2 dudes in the end zone and caught it?
Yes.
Yeah, that was still luck, but that was that game.
Oh, it was luck.
I remember that.
Yeah, I did Dorsett's recap in that series we were talking about, and he got he got 3 passes in the fourth quarter, and they were all pretty substantial. So he didn't have very eye-popping numbers, but he was pretty much the focal point of, the comeback in the fourth quarter in Tennessee.
Yeah, so I mean, going forward next year, we don't know yet whether Andre Johnson's going to be back or not. But if he's not back, then our top 3 wide receivers could be a pretty interesting group to watch, especially with a different, hopefully, a more efficient offensive scheme and not long developing routes and all that kind of stuff. Like, these guys are good with the ball in their hands. Let's get the ball in their hands quicker. And not, I mean, yes, they're all speedy, and deep shots are great, but when every single route is a 20-yard, developing play, it just kind of defeats the purpose, especially when the O-line hadn't been able to hold up in some of those games. But kind of going forward, so you're talking about doing some stuff with the draft and all that. So if you had it your way right now, the Colts, whatever, the ultimate best pick falls to the Colts, just for whatever reason, who is it and why?
If we're talking about someone falling, my favorite player in the whole draft is Jalen Smith, and it's not even the Colts' biggest need. Inside linebacker isn't their most stable position with, Dequel Jackson. He's getting up there in age, and his performance, his numbers compared to his actual performance, can be misleading a lot. Nationally, a lot of people think he's done so much better than he maybe really has. Freeman's going to be an unrestricted free agent, and then their depth guys haven't proven a ton. C.O. Moore, guys like that. Nate Irving was kind of dinged, but they don't have a guy like Jalen Smith, and yeah, they may have to be a little patient with him, but that guy, you can build a defense around him. He's a cornerstone player. Someone like that, I think it's realistic that he could fall more so than someone like, Laramie Tunsil, who's probably going to be like the first pick. Noah Spence, that would also be awesome, but I think we all know, especially with what just happened with Jonathan Newsom, he's probably off the Colts draft board, especially since Ryan Grigson last year, I think he said no red flag guys in the first 4 rounds. So although that would be awesome, I don't think that would happen.
I didn't think about that.
That probably takes Kemdichi off the board as well.
I actually did not even think about the whole what Grigson said about the red flags, how much of an impact Newsom has on that.
Yeah, that was one of my first thoughts was, well, if they were thinking about Noah Spence, I'm sure they're probably not now. But.
I mean, I don't know if any I don't want to call it recency bias, but it happened with Newsom now, whether when it happened with Spence a couple years ago. That's a good point that I actually hadn't thought of, is what they're going to be asking him and talking to him about, and Kemdichi too, because he's probably going to fall right around that range too.
They passed
and also,
on.
If those guys enter the league in the substance abuse program, however that whole thing works out, I'm sure that plays a big role in their draft stock too, as if they already get placed in that program.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Garrett?
They passed on Randy Gregory last year. That's probably they probably had reason to that. I don't know where he was on their board, but
there were reports, and I mean there's always rumor and rumored unvalidated reports that they were targeting Shane Ray even after the marijuana incident. I can't. That was like the day before the draft or a week before the draft or whatever.
That was pretty funny.
But he got drafted by the Broncos and was probably their 4th best pass rusher. But anyways, anyways, so yeah, I agree. The character thing, it's definitely interesting. But there's sometimes like Noah Spence, like everything that I've read about Noah Spence is that he's asked for drug tests. He's like, so I don't know. You never know. Like, people can turn stuff around. Like, every team would like to take a shot at Tyrann Mathieu again, right? Mm-hmm. There's I don't know. Well, I agree though. I really like Noah Spence. I really do. I think he could change the face of the defense pretty quick. But they have said so many times, it's been their mantra, horseshoe guys, right? And even though there's been strings of arrests and all that kind of stuff, every guy that they brought in has been, someone of, well, they tried to be a character, which is interesting because LaRon Landry is, like the opposite of a horseshoe guy, but they gave him a lot of money. But, DeQuell Jackson, he was arrested, but I mean, he comes over from the Browns, with high regard to his character and his leadership ability and all that kind of stuff. And he punches a pizza dude in the face for a parking spot. I mean, that's not necessarily like a horseshoe guy, right?
Well,
Exactly.
they care a lot about character. They're just horrible judges of it.
I guess. I guess. I mean, that's I guess that's probably the best reasoning we can get on that one. But we'll have to see. But I do like Jalen Smith. I'll be honest, I do. I'm not too worried about his injury either. We've seen miraculous comebacks. I'm not saying that he's going to be ready week 1, but being patient with him, I think, would go a long way, especially if we couldn't re-sign Freeman. If we can't re-sign Freeman and they drafted Jalen, then I know we could kind of be covered. And because they're not like similar players, but they would have the same almost role in our defense. So what about like a late round kind of guy? Who would you like? Are there any like late round guys that you really like for the Colts that you think we could get on a day 4, 5, 6?
Unfortunately, I don't think offensive line is too deep. If the Colts are going to uncover a probable starter on, day 3 or so, it's probably going to be one of those guys we haven't heard of, like Denzel Good or Ulrich John. But I think there's a chance, a guy like Yannick Ngakoue could be there possibly day 3. It'd be early, I would imagine. But he could be a good pass rushing guy that they could pick up. I also like Geronimo Allison, the receiver out of Illinois. I really didn't know anything about him heading into this offseason, but one of my fellow PFS guys, Luke Polglaze, kind of turned me on to him. He came in and had a really big Shrine game, and then he was a late add to the Senior Bowl, so I luckily got to see him in person. I actually haven't watched any tape on him yet, but just from what I saw with Shrine Game performance and then Senior Bowl, I like his potential a lot. I wish he got a little more separation, but that's, guys don't quit getting coached when they get to the NFL.
Yeah.
Some of the running backs, there's always seems to be late running backs that make some sort of difference. DeAndre Washington out of Texas Tech, he kind of caught my eye at the Senior Bowl. He seems to be well-rounded, can pass protect, catch the ball, things like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of those good third down backs in this class, and I think he's one of the better ones because he, like you said, he has that well-rounded skill set. He doesn't just catch the ball. He's shifty, but he can do some things with pass protection as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Good. I guess, you're at the Senior Bowl, so I guess we can ask you a couple questions since you were there live.
Sure.
Vernon Butler, is he as impressive as a man as he is on tape?
Oh yeah, he definitely was disruptive. The defensive line was pretty much, other than what people wanted to see, like guys like Carson Wentz and things like that, the storylines that developed out of the week, a lot of it was defensive line play, and Vernon Butler was a big part of that. Being a small school guy, he wasn't one of the marquee guys going in, but he definitely put his name out there by weeks in. He's really disruptive. Won a lot of one-on-one matchups, both with agility and power, and he really gave a lot of the offensive linemen, more than they could handle. I don't know if anyone else remembers this guy, but there was a nose tackle out of La Tech that I really liked a couple years ago, Justin Ellis. Raiders.
And I like.
Oh yeah.
He's on the Raiders. I really liked him coming out, and I think Vernon Butler's like way better than he was. So
is Vernon Butler like a one gapper, or is he a nose tackle?
I think he's pretty much a nose. I think, if I remember correctly, he's pretty much like 320.
Yeah, he weighed 325 and 6'3", I think. And he's, by the way, his arms, they're crazy long. They're like 34.5-inch arms.
Oh,
wow. And you can see it on tape because he's just stiff-arming offensive line with one hand, keeping him away from him, and he's using that to shed blocks and make tackles. almost like the way you want to see a linebacker do it. And I think he moves pretty well. I was really surprised when I found out he was 325 because I thought he moved better than that in space.
Yeah, no, Justin Ellis was really, really good for the Raiders when they put him in that nose tackle.
Yeah, he's. I mean, Ellis is a rotational piece, but I think that if you wanted to put Butler in for as many downs as you wanted, I think that'd be good. But also Perry's there for the run downs or whatever. But we've talked about it a lot on this podcast and amongst ourselves and on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. We're all about adding at least one D line in this draft because it's so deep. Is there one guy on that D line that you would say this guy would make an instant impact day one and would be worth a high draft pick?
I think I like A'Shawn Robinson more than a lot of people are. I think his stock has kind of cooled a bit lately. Kind of one thing I think that's a little more uncommon about my opinion is I like him and Kenny Clark more than someone like Andrew Billings, for example. Now, I admittedly have more research to do on Billings, but just from what I've seen of those three so far, I do like Kenny Clark. I wouldn't, his stock is more second roundish right now, so I wouldn't spend a first on him because there's no need to do that. But I would be fine with A'Shawn Robinson early. Someone I like a lot just because of how much energy he has is Sheldon Day, but I don't know where he would fit with the Colts. Who knows how many four-man fronts they'll run. I think he's a better fit for that.
Do you think
I really like Sheldon Day. I actually gave him a late one. I think I'm the only person who's really put him in round one consideration.
I think he's got that value too. That's the value I would place on him, but around the league, I think he's more of a late two for what I'm hearing.
I don't know. I liked him a lot. He couldn't finish, but his disruption was really good. But I think that's interesting. You said the four-man front because Notre Dame mostly ran that three-man front, and I thought he was pretty good in that. The way he would either take on the one blocker, the two blockers. I don't know. I liked him in the three-man front. I think you'd fit fine with the Colts.
It's definitely possible. They're getting kind of crowded up front, especially if Art Jones can come back healthy.
No, I agree. But at the same time, sharpening the sword. We've got a really good unit. Adding another piece, just makes that, it sets the tone, right? I feel like the defensive line really sets the tone for a lot of games, and we've not had a disruptive, front like that since the Freeney, Mathis, and Booger McFarland type days, and it's been a while, but I think we've got a lot of the good pieces there, and if Art Jones could come back and do what he was doing with the Ravens before we signed him, then man, even if we don't draft another defensive line, I think that's a good defensive line.
And we're still weak on the edges, even if we draft another defensive lineman in this class. But if you're going to be weak on the edges, at least have a strong defensive line. That's the only way you're going to be able to hurt offenses.
Yeah. At least get a pass rush right up the middle.
Yeah. No, I agree. So okay, kind of going one more question real quick. So what is the biggest need for the Colts in your mind? Every national media person is throwing Conklin or Taylor Decker right at us, and it's because Grigson and Pagano have failed to protect the face of the franchise, and if they want to have him not die on the field, they've got to do everything they possibly can. It's it's the worst offensive line in the NFL apparently. Do you agree with that sentiment, or do you think there's a bigger need?
I think they need pass rush help just as much as they need offensive line. I think in order to do what they want to do on the offensive line, they need more quality depth and to add at least one more starter, whether it be free agency or the draft, because, I think they really want Joe Wrights to be that sixth man, and hopefully Lance Lewis can just walk in free agency. There's no need to bring him back. Hugh Thornton, there's no need to, give any confidence towards him being a starter. So I would like to see them add at least one more starter, at least on the right side of the line.
As a draft in the podcast, this is also the Joe Wrights fan club that you're talking to.
No,
So,
I love Joe Wright. I just think they want him as the sixth.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's fine in the starting five.
Yeah, I'd be fine. I'd be fine with it personally.
No, but I do agree
yeah,
with you, Jake. They do want him.
Yeah, aside from the line, I think pass rusher, because that helped kill the cornerbacks too. I mean, across from Vontae Davis, it's not tremendous, but it wouldn't have been as bad if there were pressure on the quarterbacks. I mean, both Brian Hoyer and Brandon Weeden lit the Colts up. That's embarrassing. The Jaguars, I mean, Blake Bortles was good, but he is also mistake prone. They hung 50 on the Colts. Like, there were terrible performances by the defense. I mean, the whole team overall, but when I saw a lot of those performances, the lack of a pass rush was just gross, really. It was not good.
It's the same thing that showed up in the Steelers and Cowboys, etc. games last year when they got blown out.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, it's just there's been repeating patterns, and we just need them to adapt and learn from those mistakes from the past. So let's move on to the combine. So what was your Brian, analogy earlier? What were you talking about?
Oh, okay. So when James brought up if draft day is Christmas, is the combine Good Friday?
Black
I said
Friday.
yes, or Black Friday, yes, because I said yes because I'm trying to remember, maybe I should pull it up because pretty much what I'm saying is, in my analogy, the entire college football season's Thanksgiving, and then Black Friday is the combine, and so I'm saying Black Friday makes you forget like all the things that you're actually like thankful for and like stuff that you're appreciative. People are always talking like, oh, why are you going out Black Friday? Spend time with your family or like focus on like the bigger things. And so like that's my analogy, is that you have this entire like 10, 12, 15 games and of these players playing these games that you can watch and take control of and figure out who they are, but you're going to focus on one single event to figure it out. Like, I'm sorry, I don't give a shit what Quan Treadwell runs in the 40. I've seen him run past corners and safeties. I don't care what he runs wearing leggings 40 yards inside on the field without pads. I just don't care at all. I've seen enough of him to know that he can do it in the NFL.
See, I think I'm going to take a hard disagree. But that's cool. I mean, but like for me, I think the combine tells the tale of the tape in its own way. You can see a really, really fast guy on the field, on the combine, right? Mm-hmm. And you say, hey, everyone's like, oh, let's go look at this guy's tape. Let's go look at this guy's tape. And then all of a sudden you look at this guy's tape. This dude's not that fast. Or it can be the exact opposite. You see a guy who looks really fast, who plays faster on the game, and then he tests really slow. And then all of a sudden, there's confounded, oh my God, such and such linebacker ran a 4.7, he's out of the first round completely now. And then some team ends up, getting a steal of a player. So I think that, for me, I think the combine is just another way to tell that story. And, the 40-yard dash, let's be honest, it's probably the worst drill.
People only care. I mean, 10-yard split's important. Like, that's the only part people care about.
Yeah, but I mean, when it comes down to it, it's all about those explosion, call them explosion metrics, jumping, broad jump, vertical jump,
acceleration, basically.
Acceleration.
In all facets, in getting down the field, in getting out of your stance, acceleration.
Yeah, and we've noticed it before, and I think I talked about it in an article, but T.Y. McGill, Earl O'Kine. Henry Anderson, 3-cone drill beasts and in the shuttle beasts. They were really good at it, and it was interesting because before that you hadn't really seen any trends when it came to athletic profiles that Grigson had looked at. But if you look at some of these D linemen that are on the team now, they all have a similar profile when it comes to they've got 3-cone, they've got some jumps, they've got the shuttle. And their 10-yard splits aren't too bad either. So, I'm just...
the whole combine is not that the whole combine is faulty. It's just, like, I like the explosive stuff because, I mean, there has been some direct correlation when you look at the metrics, especially with front seven players. or at least mostly the lines, like the bigger guys. Like there's usually a pretty good correlation between how they're performing at the combine, because that's actually how you're able to test it, which I'm fine with, and that's how I'm good with all those formulas, hashtag force players, everything like that. But there's just a lot of stuff. Like I don't care how any quarterback throws.
Yeah.
I don't.
Quarterback's a totally different story. I mean,
Yeah, but I'm saying like at least half to 3/4 of the combine I don't care about. The only reason, like I'll watch some of it just to figure out some guys who I don't know that I'll take interest in, but I just don't care for so much of it.
Jake, let me ask you something. Do you put more stock in measurables like from the combine or from Senior Bowl and height, weight, 3-cone, 40 time, or do you put more into what you see from players in those drills at the Senior Bowl?
I've put more into, actual playing time, or like actual game experience. Like there's been so many times where I've watched a player's game tape and everything, and I've just thought he was awesome, and then I'll go and read scouting reports on him, and then people dock him for this and this and this, and I'm like, the dude can play, just watch, and I'm not that big on a lot of some of the flashy combine things. Like there's a lot of players who get overlooked because they don't blaze in the 40 and things like that. It's like some guys are just football players, you know what I mean? There's some guys that get uncovered because of, combine performances and things like that. But if it's validated on tape, then that's okay. But, it's not good to judge off of just people's combine performances and things like that. I would much rather see someone, actually perform well in practice or in a game situation than run a 4.25 40 or break Chris Johnson's 40 record. I don't really care about that.
It's actually been broken. I forget who it was, but someone showed me a side-by-side video. It was someone last year broke it, but it wasn't hand-timed as a 4.24.
Jose Canseco, when he ran a 3.9 with the Tampa Rays.
But no, I think I'm just going to ignore you. One of the things that they don't measure, they don't honestly give a whole lot of time to, because they're always showing the 40 or they're showing the drills. But like for offensive linemen, they show it on TV sometimes where they get in the stance and they do they take some step backs and all that kind of stuff. For me, I really enjoy that because you get to see. I take a lot from that. Like, I take a lot from watching them come out of their stance, do some slides, fake pass protect and all that kind of stuff, because seeing how their body moves, is such an important part. Are they flexible? Are their feet crossing? Are they staying on the balls of their feet? Stuff like that. Is that, where their hands, like even in those kind of drills, if their hands aren't in the proper spot, then even though no one's coming at them, if their hands aren't in the proper position, then they're not training themselves correctly.
I remember seeing that last year with Eric Flowers. There was like a video of Eric Flowers absolutely getting. He was so slow and so stiff, and you're like, oh, well, he does it in game, but like he's unblocked and this is still happening.
Yeah, no, I agree, but like, and I'll take the exact opposite of that. I watched those kind of drills. The only thing I could find on Denzel Good last year was his super regional combine workout tape.
We talked about Good's really strange path to the NFL before, right?
Yeah,
because
we have.
He bounced around these really small schools and had trouble getting like admission or something, and then he had to switch because he couldn't drive to class. He didn't have a car, so he's had this ridiculously insane set of obstacles in front of him to get to the NFL to get attention to himself. So he's an outlier in that respect, but he does tell you a lot about the process.
What did I miss?
He was talking about Denzel Good's crazy path to the NFL.
Oh.
But what I was saying is, like, that video from the Super Regional Combine in Phoenix or wherever it was, he was there, and you could just see the kind of movement skills out of offensive linemen that you want to see. And I know Grigson was actually there for the Super Regional Combine last year, so I think that really had a really big impact, because that tape is probably still out there, and you can just see like everything that I liked about him. in the season, his good footwork, his good, his ability to move and kind of fight people off to the side. You can really see that in those drills, and that's a lot of stuff that they don't publicize about the combine. There's a lot of drills like that, like the hands drill for wide receivers. That's not something that's timed, but watching a receiver, go look left, right, catching balls, left to the right, like that shows concentration, that shows hand skills, that shows, hand-eye coordination type stuff, and those are easy catches, yeah, but at the same time, they're showing, there's a lot to be gained from a lot of this stuff, and unfortunately for us, we're not there. We can't see, the entire field. We get to see, what's on TV, and we get to see what they show us, but there's a lot of information that you can glean from the combine, in my opinion. But as an event itself, just a crazy. Like, imagine you're going out for the biggest job interview of your life, right? You're going, biggest job interview of your life. Oh, and by the way, it's on TV. Oh, and it's live. Like, I think the NFL Network is doing like 97 straight live hours of combine coverage. Like, why? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, everything in the NFL has just gotten completely ridiculous when it comes to media coverage. And like we were talking about before we started, Jake, good hard-working reporters like Jake Arthur can't go to the combine, but there's, jackasses wearing, those morph suits, and they're there asking, people like, what's your favorite cookie? That's, I don't know. It's such a. I think I read something like 5 years ago there was like 500 people, media people at the combine, 1,700 people this year. That's just. I don't know. It's just ridiculous. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. NFL, this is a place where every NFL team is. All the agents gather. So there's lots of talk between teams, renegotiating contracts, all that kind of stuff. So there's so much going on, football going on, that in the next week or so, there'll be a lot of news to talk about that's not just someone ran a 4.23 or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think just coming from my background and learning about selection from a high level, like just seeing all of this stuff kind of broadcast on TV. You're at a job interview and all of a sudden you're on TV and you're trying to do, I don't know, a physical test or something for your new employer, and a million people are watching on TV or something like that. It's crazy. It's just. Just coming up with all these things, but a lot of it. The biggest thing for these teams is the interviews, in my opinion. Like, yeah, the drills are important, but the interviews, the medical stuff. That's the whole reason the combine was started. Gil Brandt, who has awful draft takes, was the general manager for a very long time of the Dallas Cowboys, and it was his idea to say, hey, why are we flying this poor kid 16 times in like 2 months, like a month? Like, why is this kid on a plane 16 days of the month going from team to team to team to get a medical eval? Let's just all group up. Let's do the medical evals in one spot, and then we can all share. Like, that's the true value of the combine. That's the whole reason it started, and that's the reason it's still here. And, there's going to be so much come out. I forget who said they can't already work out. Like, Miles Jack, I think, or he said he can't work out, but his medical stuff will be there. He'll interview with teams. So there's, even if they're not working out, they're still there. They're still getting all the good stuff out of their way that they need to get going. I don't know. So I guess we got about 10 minutes left, so we'll just kind of run through real quick each position group real quick, and let's just, I know we've talked about some of this already, but if you were going to say, hey, what was the most important drill for a certain group, which one would it be? Quarterback, none, in my opinion. There's not really. Maybe I talked about how I hate the 40, but the 40 might be the only one that might actually be kind of interesting for quarterbacks. Everything else they don't actually even really try to do. I don't know. They throw. Some of them throw. I think all of the quarterbacks are throwing this year.
I think the top 7 guys are all throwing.
Yeah. So, which is cool. But let's go on to some of the more fun positions. Garrett, in your article about Daniel Alasco, you talked about how running backs should be was it bishops, not rooks?
Yes, I talked about diagonal movement for running backs and how even though in highlight reels and stuff and vines you see a lot of jukes, guys suddenly stopping their feet and like jumping to the side, going sideways. And in college, that can make a defender look ridiculous, and it's really cool. And it's totally viable there. But in the NFL, it's better to keep your feet moving and especially keep your feet going forward, at least to some extent. So that's why I talk about diagonal movement as opposed to lateral movement, because if you stop your feet in the NFL, you usually get tackled. Mm-hmm. So I look for guys who are really smooth and can accelerate while turning or out of their cuts really well. And for that, I like to look at the 10-yard split and the 3-cone drill. Those are two of my favorites. 3-cone especially, I think, also works for cornerback, which is my probably favorite defensive position. And It's valuable for other positions as well.
No, honestly, the 3-cone, because the cones are so close together, it doesn't simulate NFL, but being able to dip and turn corners and move around those corners is definitely huge for almost every group.
And there's no single drill I can point to that really captures what I look for in running backs in terms of them being smooth athletes or any position for that matter. But there's still some valuable stuff. If you know what you're looking for, I think you can get a lot out of the combine.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Jake, let's move on to wide receivers. For wide receivers, like if you're looking at the combine, what one of those drills do you think most I guess helps confirm the story or the tape of a wide receiver? What drill for that would be for you?
Oh, a couple things I like to watch with receivers at the combine. I don't know what the name of it is, but it's almost like this little obstacle course. They have running backs do it too, but I like to see if they look natural in their cuts and running routes and things like that, because I value the mechanics of the receiver position more than height, weight, speed, stuff. Like, give me a Rashad Green over a Sammy Coates, for instance. Stuff like that. Guys who can do the technical things. I also, in the gauntlet, I like to see their mental toughness, because you can see a lot of guys, if they drop a ball or two, it ruins their whole run through the gauntlet. But, if they catch everything, that's good. But do they melt down if they drop the first one or two of the first? There's in the 3-cone as well, short area quickness, things like that. That's some of the things I like to look at when it comes to receivers at the combine.
Yeah. Another thing I want to think about for the combine is we talk about the 40-yard dash, but excuse me, like I like looking at each 10-yard split and see, because if you got a guy who's supposed to be like a vertical threat, and sure, maybe his first 10, 20 yards are great, but like, can he also get separation in the 20 to 30, in the 30 to 40? Is he getting faster? How much is he getting slower? So I think that'll really be able to tell. Obviously, a lot like his hands and his body positioning will be a big factor in how much he gets separation. But it's good to look at the times and see where he accelerates the most or where he slows down.
Yeah, no. That's a very good point. The speed over distance versus initial quickness, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
And it's not for every wide receiver, but for some, if you're looking at them as a true deep threat, how much are they improving the farther they run?
Right. Like J.J. Nelson, the Cardinals. That dude's 10-yard, like, you could see his acceleration.
Go watch his highlight reel from college.
It's nuts.
Mm-hmm.
So, and for offensive line, I think offensive line, there's not ever been, correlation between, what drill makes a good offensive lineman. But for me, I think a lot of it has to do with that. Again, the 3-cone drill and the 20-yard shuttle shows that. The 20-yard shuttle especially shows that flexibility and the balance, and then the 3-cone shows that agility, and those are really important traits. And then again, we already kind of talked about the pass rushers and stuff like that. We want to see those explosive metrics, the jumps.
Yeah, the broad jump by far, I think is probably the most telling for edge. That's what I was going to bring up next. It's just like that lower body explosiveness to get from one point to another. I mean, obviously they're not running, but just like the sheer like force and energy like coming from the bottom of your body, like from your base, and just bringing it all the way through your body into explosion is just really. I mean, that's what we saw last year when Dupree did what he did.
Mm-hmm. And then, moving on to another group, what Byron Jones did when he jumped out of Lucas Oil Stadium. I mean, that's kind of an example that Jake said, people get uncovered at the combine. Byron Jones jumps out of Lucas Oil Stadium, and all of a sudden, I think he's a first-round pick. And then, well, what was he? He was a first-round pick, and it was partly because his tape was actually okay, but he jumps like he does, and then everyone takes notice. I mean, he set the world record for broad jump, right? I think he did. So I mean, it was ridiculous. It was like 12'9" or something like that. It was absolutely stupid. And I don't know. But like inside linebacker though, you're looking the 3-cone again. That change of direction, that's really important, and the 10-yard splits. And then safety and cornerback, again, the jumps. A lot of defense is about that, explosion, agility type stuff.
No, I think like inside linebacker and safeties, like the agility, like when you're dealing with like play action, misdirection, counters, like the ability to stop and go from one way. I know Eric Stoner showed that video of Miles Jack when he was like coming up to the line and he just like on a dime just like stopped and went diagonal and caught the guy like 30 yards downfield. That's important. Like even if you want to talk about drills, just the one where they have the guy holding out the football and they're watching the linebackers move back and forth. Like that's huge.
Yeah, and the drill with the offensive linemen with the bags on the ground where they've got to like weave in and out like back and forwards. That really shows how well can they move back and forward, I guess, and side to side, and it's they're all important, and scouts take them. Each team is different, right? Each team is going to look at things different when it comes to these drills. And then you're always going to get Mike Mayock or someone being like, well, there's Tom Coughlin sitting. Tom Coughlin sits and does the 10-yard split by himself. I don't know if you knew that, Brian. You like the 10-yard split. Tom Coughlin sits in the front row every single year and does a 10-yard split. He doesn't trust anyone else to do it because he takes that much value in it. But some teams can be like, I don't give a rat's ass about this. Like, let's move on. They tested okay. They're in a certain boundary. They're what we saw in tape matches. The combine, and so they move on. And I don't really know what kind of team. I don't know where Indianapolis really falls in that. We can start seeing trends. I mean, we've already had 4 years. There's not really, in my opinion, been a trend that's developed, but we get them for another 5. So let's see.
We drafted Werner, who wasn't
not a workout warrior
star, and we drafted Dorsett, who was nailed the 40.
Yep, exactly. So we'll have to see. But it's 10, and like I said, try to wrap this up. Jake, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you, man.
It was a blast.
I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, I mean, we get on here and we say, sometimes we feel like we might say the same stuff over and over. It's always good to have someone else come in, and we've talked about Jalen Smith before, and you're the biggest fan of Jalen Smith that I know, and it's good to talk about it because I think he's a really good player, and I'm not going to be upset if he was taken again. So there's lots of stuff. Everyone's got their own opinions, and we're glad to bring in other opinions, and yours is very valued, and we thank you. And you guys listeners, check out Jake at Jake Arthur PFS. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. And
then the Indianapolis Colts Pro Football Spot website. Jake, you're like the lead guy there, right?
Yeah, I run the Colts and the Colts page in the AFC South.
There you go. So again, everyone, thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.